True Digital Security CEO Rory Sanchez is here to discuss news from Microsoft, Poly, and the wireless-first, cloud-oriented network of the future, plus a special guest interview with Mark Kirstein of Cosant Cyber Security on CMMC 2.0. It's ChannelPro Weekly, number 208, BYOP. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode number 208. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for you. And who are you? You are the VARs, the MSPs, the IT integrators, the managed service providers. I think I said that one already. You are the managed security service providers. You are the you if you do technology stuff with other businesses, you are in the right place. So if that's you, welcome. Great to have you. Joining me each and every week is the man of the hour here at ChannelPro, the executive editor here, Rich Freeman.
Hey, Matt, I can officially say I have finally finished digesting Thanksgiving dinner at this point.
It takes a long time for all that turkey to wind its way through, doesn't it? Yeah. So it's been a couple of weeks since we've done a show. So we had the Thanksgiving holiday. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was very nice, actually. It was very, I'm not always the best. Especially during these sort of shorter breaks, as opposed to like going somewhere for a week. You get a 4-day weekend, and sometimes I wind up having to work. But I really did unplug for 4 days, and it was great.
Awesome stuff. I took a little time off myself. I took the whole week. I've got a little bit of extra vacation time still yet to use, but it was nice. It was an interesting week, but I will say the Thanksgiving dinner was good. Now, did you have turkey?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And was it tasty?
It was very tasty. Sides were very tasty. I have heard this described as a debate. In my mind, this isn't really a debate, but there is the team of people who, they're all about the turkey, and then there are the people who are all about the sides. I am on team sides. Are there people out there who really, they're turkey first?
See, the people who are turkey first are the ones that know how to make really good turkey. Because there's a lot of people that if you don't have a good turkey, if you dry it out or whatever, you're going to be all about the sides. And there's a lot of different ways to make a turkey. I'm going to be curious to see how yours was done, because ours turned out great. And I bet someone else here can chime in on this topic as well. I can't wait to get him introduced here. In fact, this will be not his first time joining us this week. We're glad that he is here. He is an entrepreneur, he's an investor, and he's the CEO of True Digital Security, a full-service cybersecurity firm that assists its clients in raising the maturity level of their IT security and compliance programs. Please welcome back Mr. Rory Sanchez. Welcome, Rory.
Hey, good to be here.
It is awesome to have you. I know we're already struggling with some office Wi-Fi issues for where you're at. So hopefully we can keep your audio connected the whole time. We'll just kind of see how that rolls. But are you team turkey or are you team sides, Rory?
Well, it's funny. I'm listening to that discussion with you guys, and I'm thinking, this is probably why I'm a little bit of a political centrist, because I think when it comes to these things, at the same time, like, you got to have some really good sides, right? But if the turkey's not good, I don't think really good sides could make up for it. So I'm going to have to go somewhere in the middle. And I'm going to say, you know what? Both ideas have some really good sides. There's some good points that we need to bring to the table. So let's not exclude anybody. I say we ignore the people far to the turkey and far to the sides, and we focus on the things we can all agree on in the middle.
You are team sandwich, right? Put it all together between bread, the leftovers.
I got to tell you, at my house, we had turkey, and then, we always had way too much turkey. So after turkey, there was turkey sandwiches. And then my grandmother would make croquettes out of the leftover turkey. And then the day after that, my dad made turkey croquette sandwiches, right? So the whole thing just took like a week. And then after that, this is what really led to no more turkey until next year.
We are also just about through the turkey leftovers. We have turkey, and then we like we were saying, make a lot of different things. We are finishing up the turkey tetrazzini here, and once that's gone, all of the turkey's gone. However, I gotta say, our turkey was fantastic. So Rory, how did you do your turkey?
How did we do our turkey? We did one of those. I forget what it's called. So the you inject the turkey and you deep fry it, and it happens kind of quickly, and it kind of sears it and cooks it and kind of juicy. I was not in charge of that, but it was a very good turkey.
So it was deep fried.
Yes.
Yeah, deep fried turkey is good. That's not everybody's comfortable doing that though, because there's some risk to that. And Rich, how was yours done?
It was just plain old oven roasted and very, very good. But I have had deep fried turkey before, and agreed, it's a little scary, getting it in, getting it out, and dealing with this sort of pressure cooker apparatus. But that's the most moist turkey I've ever had.
Yeah, they usually turn out pretty juicy that way.
Yeah, hadn't done it in a while, but we had some experts involved, so it was very good.
Very cool. Now ours was a labor of love. Ours was brined for in a brine that we do for 12 hours and then smoked, and it was pretty amazing. My wife smoked the turkey. She's the one who's got the patience to do all that. And it was amazing. So very, very good stuff. I'm a big fan of the brining. I think that works out well. Nice and juicy, good flavor. Adds a lot of flavor. That's what I think is nice. Some people think turkey's kind of bland and dry, but if you do it right, folks, it's really good. Anyway, we could talk about turkey and sides all day. Rory, but it's great to have you here. I know you've been on a couple times before, but if you can take a few minutes and tell everybody who might be new a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. So I think you gave the highlights there, right? I'm CEO at True Digital Security. Again, we help our clients to raise the maturity level of their IT security and compliance programs. We do a lot of work around managed detection and response. We have a risk assessment team. We do incident response. I'm actually at the Tulsa office today, so and there's actually a bunch of people in the office. I'm on my laptop. We could potentially go down the walkway here and find some guys who are doing some ethical hacking and some fun stuff. But I'll try to just sit here and stay on topic. When I thought of that, because every now and then somebody goes by and does something over here to try to make me laugh. So if you suddenly see telling people to go away, they're like, "Oh, look, Rory's in town. We should go harass him while he's on somebody's podcast."
I encourage as much of that as we can possibly get on this show. As much harassment as possible. Very cool. So you're in Tulsa, but that's not where you're from. You're from South Florida. Is that correct?
I'm usually in South Florida. Yeah, we have an office in West Palm and an office up in Long Island, and then for Tulsa, we actually have kind of two locations in Tulsa. We have an office in Tulsa, and then just south of Tulsa is where our security operations center is.
And how did you end up from South Florida to Tulsa? What made you put the offices there?
Well, back in 2018, we combined a couple of companies, and True Digital Security had been founded in Tulsa by some of those some guys who were part of CyberCore. This is where the government pays for part of your education, and then you pay them back by going to work at the various three-letter organizations. And when you're done with your government payback time, then you go out and some of these guys have been from University of Tulsa, and they were Tulsans. Tulsans love Tulsa, and if you spend any time here, you'll know why. It's a real cool town, unexpectedly cool town, and it's like the next Austin coming up, and they're all located here, and there's a lot of really good cybersecurity talent and some cool things happening in this town. So I don't spend a lot of time here, but I do like spending time here.
I got to say, Rory, the last time you were on the show, we were playing 5 questions with you, which regular listeners or viewers know what that's about. And I asked you some question about Tulsa, like why should people go to Tulsa? What's great about Tulsa? You had no preparation for this. You didn't know this question was coming, but you launched into like a 3-minute pitch for Tulsa that was so good that by the end of it was like, I am going, and I haven't been doing a ton of travel because of the pandemic and so on, but I'm still determined to get out to Tulsa because you really did such a great job of making it sound like, and you compared it, I remember, to Austin when you were doing that before, and that's a place I like a lot. But you said the people are great, the food's great, the music's great, and it's like, I got to get out there.
There is. There's a cool music scene, and there's a lot of investment going into, kind of bringing in some companies and creating jobs, and there's a lot of infrastructure going on around here, and attracting a young crowd. That is, part of what I think really helps to fuel all of that. And a lot of the people who are a lot of the Oklahomans from this area who end up going to the various universities around here, they don't want to leave. This is where they want to raise their families and have great work ethic. I have nothing but good things to say here.
Well, very cool. Well, next week on Discover America, we're going to be talking about other great cities in the Oklahoma and Texas region. Make sure you tune in for that. No, anyway, I'm kidding, Roy. It's not. You do really make a good case for it. I hope to also get down there at some point and check that out as well. But we've got a lot on the show to cover, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about cities because we got some news and some interesting stuff that we need to talk about. For example, Microsoft's in the news. They got something new that is out there for small businesses. Poly's in the news. We're going to talk about that. And we got a couple stories that we're going to kind of talk to together because they kind of go together, but it's about networks of the future and cloud security. So you're not going to want to miss any of that. Strap in. It's going to be a fun ride. So Rich, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what Microsoft is doing. They've launched a new app, but it's kind of a big deal. What is it?
Yeah, well, it's not so much a new app. It's a new subscription opportunity for what has been one of the most popular apps since the beginning of the pandemic. A little hard to believe now, but back late 2019, before the pandemic struck, there were something like 20 million active Microsoft Teams users worldwide. As of July, when Microsoft did its quarterly financials report, there were 250 million monthly active users of Microsoft Teams. So obviously explosive growth. And up until this week, you had, and this has been available for a long time, there was the standalone free edition of Teams, which was Microsoft's attempt to make it easy for people to kind of put their toe in the water, check it out a little bit. So you could get it for free on a standalone basis, and then you could also get it obviously as part of Microsoft 365 subscriptions. There's the Business Basic subscription, which goes for $5 per user per month. There's the Business Standard, which goes for $12.50. Business Premium, I forget what the pricing is on that. Now there is something sort of in between those Microsoft 365 subscriptions and the free standalone edition of Teams. It's called Teams Essentials. It is specifically directed at small businesses. Standalone product. $4 per user per month. And remember, Business Basic is, at least if you're getting it directly from Microsoft, is all of this pricing actually is the direct from Microsoft. You're going to get it, at better rates if you're working through your distributor. But the list price on Business Basic is $5 a user a month. Teams Essential, it's $4 a user a month. What are you getting in Teams Essentials that you couldn't get in the free edition? More functionality. So Teams Essentials comes with group video calls for up to 30 hours and up to 300 people. You get up to 10 gigabytes of file storage, group chat, calendaring, among other features. That's that storage, the 10 gigabytes of storage, that's twice what you get with the free edition of Teams. There are fewer limitations on how long a video meeting can go. So it's a starter version of Teams, but less constrained basically, and more feature packed basically than the free edition. According to Microsoft, there are 4 scenarios where this might be particularly appealing for channel partners. So if you have customers who have an existing email solution, either something on-prem or hosted in the cloud that they like and they don't want to switch off of, and this has somehow been keeping them away from Teams because they don't want to go full-blown Microsoft 365, here's a way to enable them to keep the email they've got, and this will integrate with potentially with that email, but get them started on Teams and get them enabled to do that kind of video collaboration. If you have customers with a legacy old school PBX system, you want to get them off of that. This can be an affordable way to do that. Frontline workers, if you have customers in retail or manufacturing, say they don't sit at a desk, they're not in front of a computer all day, but they would benefit from having access to some of the functionality in Teams. This is kind of an affordable entry-level way to make that available to the customers. And then probably least applicable to most of the folks in our audience, if you are a developer, you have created a Teams-based solution of some kind, Teams Essentials can be sort of a cheaper platform to use when rolling out your product to customers who are using that. Rather than require them to have a full-blown suite, you can just give them Teams, $4 a user a month, and then your software on top of that. And the other thing from a partner standpoint, and this is absolutely something that Microsoft is encouraging its cloud solution provider program members to be involved with and sell to their customers. And they say another way to think about the product basically is as a way to introduce your customers to Teams, because there is an upgrade path basically from here as their needs grow, as they maybe become more enamored of Teams. You get them started, you give them a taste, and then you can kind of move them on into Microsoft 365. So Matt, we all wear a lot of hats at ChannelPro. One of the hats you wear is you are the manager, the administrator of our Microsoft 365 tenant. And so I'm sort of curious from your perspective, what does this look like? How appealing do you expect it to be to other people like yourself who are small business Teams and Microsoft 365 users?
That's a good question. I want to get Rory's take on it too. My take is though, is that the customer really does need to fit in one of those niche buckets, because if you're going to roll somebody into Teams, unless they already have those other checkboxes marked, then they don't want to move into a more integrated solution. There's really no reason, I think, to go this route. You would go into the Microsoft 365 basic plan or one of the business plans, because I think even the basic plan is just like $1 more a month, and you get a whole bunch of other stuff on top of it. But it's cool. I think they needed to address the market and have some kind of offering that's a little bit more premium offering between the free version, which is a lot of what consumers and stuff use, to give them some of the business features and not have it necessarily directly tied into an Office 365 plan. But this is clearly a stepping stone. I mean, and this, you can see what Microsoft's doing is, right, they're saying, okay, you want to get into Teams, but from here, it is going to be really difficult for somebody to kind of take this step and then eventually not take the next step, as they see all of the additional benefits that you get when you're in like the Office suite that is completely cohesive, right? Rory, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant step on their part. You know how it is. People don't want to pay for things that they're not using. So when people are using, say, an email platform or something they're really happy with, and they go, you know what, I get it comes with all these things, but it's a bunch of things I don't need. So let's call it somewhat watered down, or something that comes with a less bundled offering is going to get more people to test the waters. And at the end of the day, it's brilliant. You get the let's face it, it's a Microsoft world, and we all live in it. So and Microsoft has obviously taken a step back, looked at the world, and went, hey, we have a bunch of people who aren't part of the ecosystem. What are the barriers to entry? And I think they're addressing it. And you're a Teams user. I'm a Teams user. Teams is very good at what it does, and I love the integrations with the various other pieces of Microsoft software that we use. So getting more people on board, I think particularly MSPs who have those clients who have been hesitant. I mean, most MSPs are Microsoft partners, so they're probably getting some, like we are, getting some discounts on licenses based on the partner program. And it also makes it, we use Teams, which makes it easy for us to support our clients who are using Teams. So it's a brilliant move. I like it.
Yeah, I agree. Rich, you have any thoughts?
No, I mean, I think what you said makes it makes a lot of sense, and I'm intrigued about this too as an opportunity to expand the Microsoft Cloud business for a cloud partner, basically. That, you know, and that, so there are those four groups of customers out there who, you know, haven't felt able to clear the barriers to entry that Rory was kind of talking about there. And so now here's a way to bring them into the customer base and get a little revenue from those companies as well, and then set those companies up to be even bigger revenue sources down the road.
Yeah, you know, one thing I found that was interesting is they put a limitation on the number of hours of video conferencing that you can do. I found that to be an interesting one, because I don't believe, now Rory, I don't know how familiar you are with the Office plans. I don't think they have that restriction in the 365 business basic plan, or do you know if they do or not?
I do not know. That's a really good question. I couldn't possibly become an expert in Microsoft licensing people sometimes to figure that out. If I put all that in my head, I wouldn't have, you know, room for fun stuff. I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't think they do, which means I think, you know, they introduce this kind of paid plan, you get people in, and then you put a limiter on it. So like you get people to bump up against that limit, and then they'll need to upgrade from there, right? And then you're into the next suite. So I think it's nice that they're offering some mechanism, but I do believe that this is mostly a self-serving mechanism for Microsoft to get more people up into the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 plans.
I wonder if that'll be a barrier. I wonder if some people will look at it and go, "Oh, really? You know, yeah, I'd like to try it, but I don't like that limitation." Right? Am I gonna bump up against it? And you know, Microsoft is just trying to reel me in and get me to upgrade. No, right? So I don't know. It'd be interesting if that turns out being a little bit of a barrier, and we'll find out if they pull that barrier in 6 months.
Yeah, we'll see. And I don't know for certain if there's limitations in the basic plan, because we don't have anybody internally on the basic plan, so I'm not really sure. But yeah, you know what? For those who wanted business grade teams without the rest of it, there you go. You got your offers, $4 a month per user. So go and check it out. And we got more information on this story on the website. So we'll put a link to it from the show notes page. So if you're an audio listener, sometimes you can open up the show description in your phone or tablet, and the links will be there. If you're an iPhone user, you have to go to channelpronetwork.com and find the show sheet for 208. And you'll have all the links there. If you're watching on YouTube, hello, hit the like button, subscribe, and open up the description area. You'll see all of the links in there for you as well. And of course, leave a comment on YouTube. That always helps too. So this story and all the other stories that we're going to be talking about, you can find all the information about it there and get more of the details, because we're just kind of scratching the surface. Moving on, Poly is offering credit for some office communication equipment upgrades. Tell us about that.
On its own, this is not a huge story, but I think it points to a bigger opportunity for folks to be mindful of. Now, if I remember right, I posted this story the same week that both HP and Dell reported their most recent quarterly earnings, and both those companies had huge quarters. I believe it was a record quarter for Dell. And they both, and HP in particular, said that office reopenings are what's fueling that growth right now. And this is a phenomenon we've spoken about before on the podcast, right? And it's kind of a familiar idea. So people have been working from home chiefly, maybe exclusively, for the last year and a half. There have been a lot of upgrades in terms of home office equipment, and people working maybe on a late generation laptop that they had at home anyway. Now the office reopens, they go back to the office and are reunited with this desktop PC that is a year and a half older than it already was when they left the office. It is not really optimized for video conferencing. It doesn't have the features or the coolness or any of the stuff people have gotten used to at home. And so they want to upgrade that hardware. And in fact, in a very tight labor market, I mean, this can actually be a recruiting issue or a retention issue. Do you not have latest generation equipment in the office? Well, Poly the audiovisual conferencing equipment maker, is seeing and acting on that same trend, basically. And so the story we're talking about here is one I wrote about a program that Poly has had actually in place for a little while, and it just, I don't think, has gotten a whole ton of attention. It's called Poly Renew. And the basic idea is, just as people are going back to the office and they're greeting that desktop PC they hate, they're going back to the office and seeing once again that desktop phone they hate. And it's not, it doesn't have the features that the phone they used at home has. They don't have maybe the high definition camera that they're using for video conferencing at home. They don't have the noise canceling headphone that they've gotten real used to using at home. And they want all that stuff at the office. So what can you as a business owner do? Well, you can take those old Poly desktop phones, and this applies only to devices in two particular series, the VVX and CCX phone series, for people who know their Poly desktop phones. But you can return those devices through a partner. This is 100% through partners. You can return those devices to Poly. You get a credit, and then you can use that credit to buy newer gear like cameras and headsets and latest generation devices. And again, this is something that's going to make you popular with your customers, because it's going to make your customers popular with their employees, and enable. There are a lot of complaints. Some people are delighted to be back in the office. Some people less so, and the people who are less so tend to say I was more productive at home. To the degree that you're equipping them with the same kind of hardware, phones and PCs and beyond, that they have at home, you're kind of breaking down that objection a little bit. So here's just one other small way to think about cashing in on what is a big kind of office hardware spending wave right now for SMBs and larger businesses that partners can absolutely be a part of.
And so what are they doing with all of these old phones that they're getting back?
That's a really good question, isn't it, Matt? What are they doing with all these old phones? We'll find out, right? Let's interview some of the Poly partners and find out. My guess is going to be that Poly doesn't even want it back, right? This is a way of making sure if you're buying something new, you're taking the old one out of service. So at the end of the day, it ends up being a discount on new stuff. But there's no way they want all those old phones back.
Well, I find it interesting that they have very specific series. I wonder if there's still value in those, if they can redeploy them, or if they can do something with them.
Well, this is actually an important point. So I'm glad that question came up, because one of the things Poly emphasizes is that they do want the devices back, and they are either going to refurbish them and resell them, or recycle them. So, and Poly says one of the things about this program that potentially makes it appealing to an end user is that if you have sustainability policies or goals or so on, the fact that they're not dumping these old phones in a landfill somewhere is something, a selling point basically for this. And then, if I remember right, I hope I'm not misspeaking, but to the degree that chips are in short supply right now, there are probably components inside those phones that they can actually yank out of there and reuse.
And when you build like a new deck out of polycarbonate stuff, you're like, hey, polycarbonate, Poly phones, my new deck could potentially be my old recycled phones.
I like it.
Well, I was just looking up a CCX 700, which is what they say they will give maybe $60 for. Well, those things sell starting at $669.95. So this seems like a very profitable venture, perhaps, for Poly, if they're selling them renewed for even $200 off list price.
Yeah. And hey, I have a really, really dumb question that I think I know the answer to, but Poly used to be Polycom.
Yes. So Polycom merged with what was the other company? A very, very familiar name, and because it's the end of the year, I'm blanking on it. But that Poly is the new brand. Polycom, and come on. Oh yeah, Plantronics. So Plantronics and Polycom came together, and now they are known as Poly.
And they don't want a cracker.
They don't want a cracker.
They want your old phones, so that way they can buy lots of crackers. I don't know. No, it's good. I mean, hey, if it gets old hardware and it helps them get new customers and sell new phones, why not? Right? There's some. If you're wanting to get rid of the phones anyway, at least you can get something for them. Although I do wonder, rather than returning them to the reseller, I wonder what the resell market is. Like, can you just take your Poly phone and just resell it to somebody, sell it to somebody else?
I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Yeah,
It seems like you'd probably get a lot more than $60, right?
Matt, you could bring up eBay real quick and see what.
One step ahead of you, sir. Let's see what the use rate is on.
And Rich, I don't want to start any, like potential antitrust trouble, but now that Polycom and Plantronics are the same company, who else sells phones?
I'm not super familiar with that. There are definitely companies that do that. I'm trying to think of what is it? Link. I'm trying to think of the names of the companies that the VoIP providers all kind of partner with on hardware.
And hey, this ties into the previous conversation, but any new phones going out, they need to be Teams compatible phones, right? Because I think it's a Polycom phone at my desk in West Palm, and it's awesome, right? Like somebody calls me on Teams, or I need to call somebody on, the phone pops up and says, you've got a meeting starting now. So I can join from the phone, or I can join from the computer, right? It's brilliant that, you make Microsoft your phone company, and you've got a Teams compatible phone from whoever is making those, and it all ties together.
That's true. And the used market is a little more lucrative, I think, for Polyphones. So something people might want to think about as well. So interesting stuff. Folks, let us know what you think of the Poly deal. Is that something you guys are going to take advantage of? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Let us know. Send us an email, podcast@channelpronetwork.com, or leave a comment on YouTube. Rich, we got two other stories that we want to talk about. I think we're going to kind of talk about them together. So the first is kind of this wireless first cloud oriented network of the future story. And another one is from Sophos and Trend Micro. Why are we talking about these together, and what's it all about?
So it just so happens I wrote both of these stories in the same week. They are not sort of directly connected to one another, but they both kind of point to how all of the phenomena that we're familiar with from the last year and a half in terms of remote work and hybrid work and the shift towards the cloud, how that's really kind of influencing not just the industry and the vendor community, but also SMB infrastructures, and therefore by extension the channel pros out there who support those SMBs. So let's start quickly with the network piece of this. One of the two stories I wrote was about networking, and you might remember, Matt, it was not quite a year ago. I want to say it was January maybe of this year. We had Alex Hoff from Auvik on the show to do an interview segment, and we were talking about the annual network diversity report that Auvik does. So they collect telemetry from they do network management. That's the business they're in, and therefore they're getting anonymous data from 520,000 different managed devices on 40,000 networks right now, and they can look for trends and patterns. And for the third year in a row now, they've kind of reported on what they're seeing. Long story short, and the changes, I won't get into the specific numbers, but just know that these are not dramatic changes that we're talking about. But what they saw that was maybe most notable this year is that there was a real shift. If you were to think about the kind of network hardware in an SMB environment in terms of market share, like what kind of market share does an access point consume in an SMB office versus a firewall or a switch or a router? The market share for access points has gone up in the last year, and the market share for firewalls and switches has gone down. And according to Auvik, this is really kind of a harbinger of what is going to be a bigger and longer term trend. The SMB network of the future is not going to look like the SMB network of the past. I mean, one reason that you're seeing more access points rolling out relative to these other kinds of devices is because we have the switch to hybrid work and laptops. People are spending less time at assigned desks with wired connections, maybe. They're splitting their time between office and home. They're on Zoom and Teams a lot more, and so they need more Wi-Fi bandwidth for that. So there is that sort of issue. But to the extent that SMBs are increasingly doing most of what they do in IT in the cloud, there just really isn't as much need anymore for that sort of east-west traffic behind the firewall inside the corporate network. Really, increasingly what SMBs need is secure, reliable, high-speed, north-south, connectivity to the cloud. And that really is just kind of what they need. And they want it to be wireless because that's how people work. Auvik itself is a perfect example of this. All they have is Wi-Fi now, and they have really sort of optimized, tailored their network just for connecting to the cloud. That's really all they are enabling people in their office to do. This is not, this is far from universally true in SMB networks today. But I really think that this is what the SMB network is going to look like increasingly going forward. And therefore, that is what folks in our audience are going to be responsible for designing and implementing and supporting increasingly going forward. By the same token, to the degree that more and more of what SMBs do, they do in the cloud, securing those cloud workloads looms more and more prominently. And so this other story that I wrote this week, it happens to be connected to the Amazon Web Services reInvent event that's been happening this week. I had a chance to catch up with both Sophos and Trend Micro as they were in attendance at that event. And really the big kind of theme that came out of that, and I don't have exact numbers like what percentage of Sophos R&D dollars are going into cloud security as opposed to other kinds. But it's pretty clear that's really the priority right now for those two companies, and probably pretty much anyone else in security right now, is really thinking about the needs of a business in terms of cloud security, and making sure that they have a complete range of products, and also from their perspective, best of breed products in these categories. And maybe the best way to put it is just to quote Dan Chapa, the Chief Product Officer at Sophos, who has actually been on our podcast a few times. And at one point in the conversation with him, talking about the cloud and cloud security, he said, quote, "That's where a lot of the compute is going. That's where security is going. That's where we're going." So just another reflection about how these trends that we talk about a lot are really having a noticeable and permanent kind of change on where vendors bet their dollars and how our readers are going to be, the services our readers are going to be providing for their customers.
So on this side, we're saying more and more stuff is happening in the cloud, including the networking part of it. And so Wi-Fi networks are now more important to have the access, high-speed access to the cloud, and wireless because it's got to be wireless. But now we also have to protect it because we're putting everything in the cloud, now we need a hell of a lot more cloud security. Am I kind of following the connection between these?
SMBs are becoming truly cloud-first businesses, and that is changing the nature of both networking and security for SMBs. The network architecture needs to be cloud-first, and the security priorities need to be cloud-first.
Gotcha. Rory, is that what you're saying too? Do you agree?
Absolutely. I completely agree. And it's funny that, we're talking about Wi-Fi combined, because I think there's also a big kind of pending opportunity around Wi-Fi, right? Everybody, to a certain degree, just a couple of years ago, Wi-Fi had become a little mundane, right? Everybody had Wi-Fi, and everybody had deployed Wi-Fi. Then everybody went home and started working from home, and I think he's lost a little bit of control over what people were doing at home, and there were lots of conflicts between, you know, you've got a husband and wife who were suddenly both working from home, and they both worked for a company who at one point wanted to secure the home network, and they were a little bit in conflict with each other. But now, as people are moving back into offices, you know, Wi-Fi has really kind of matured and is ripe for an upgrade. You know, there's a lot of new Wi-Fi coming out. I even, I was, you know, this was new to me. You know, there's Wi-Fi access points now that you can deploy, and you pre-program them, you send them out to a satellite office. You know, when you plug them in, they connect up to the cloud, they download their programming, and it creates a VPN back to a corporate office or back to a cloud-based network. And now you've deployed a Wi-Fi access point and added those users on that Wi-Fi access point back to a corporate network somewhere, right? Super ease of deployment, ease of management, and a lot of control over what's going on in those locations. I think as people move back into offices, Wi-Fi is vastly ripe for an upgrade. And then agreed that you see more and more SMBs who don't need anything, right? They don't need anything at the office. We don't need servers. We don't need, you know, switches. I could see a switch sales being flat, if not a little bit down. I'm going to say there's not been a lot of changes in switching technology and switches, and you know, and they're kind of robust. They last a long time, and maybe don't need refresh nearly as much. And as people are doing more around Wi-Fi, you know, you're only limited to how much bandwidth you have coming into the office, and regardless of how fast of a switch you have, the ultimate bottleneck is how fast you're getting out onto the internet. And tying that into security, yes, right? MSPs absolutely have to step up their cloud security knowledge, Wi-Fi security knowledge. You know, these are critically important to particularly to maintain relevancy in helping your clients to continue to do what they do. Right. This is an area where I think, you know, clients in general start thinking, hey, wait, you used to manage my servers. Now I don't have servers anymore. You know, we used to have lots of endpoint issues, and now we're just connecting to something and using some virtual desktops in the cloud or whatever it is. And those customers start thinking more and more like, what do I need this MSP for? Right. But I think the MSP role is changing. But kind of staying ahead of the technology and helping secure those clients and making sure that their compute is where it needs to be. That's where they're going to play.
Very interesting. And as you were saying, Richard, there's less internetwork traffic now because so much of it goes out to the cloud. So you just need a lot less hardware in an office, traditional hardware for that kind of backbone. So, yeah, that's got to be very business specific, right? I have to imagine that not all businesses will have the ability or capacity to move massive amounts of data up to the cloud. So I'm sure there's still a market for traditional networks, correct?
Yes, and again, I didn't get into the very specific numbers from the Auvik report. We're not talking about 20% growth in access points and 18% dips and switches and so on. It's a relatively subtle change, but it's one that Auvik is quite convinced is going to keep happening. Basically, that this is again a harbinger of a longer term trend.
Was there any other notes in the Auvik report that were interesting or showed anything unique?
Quickly, I guess the report is called the Network Diversity Report, and a lot of the inspiration around it originally was just to see how wide a range of network hardware makers does the average MSP support, because obviously the more you're standardized around a smaller number of companies, the more efficient it is for the MSP. And those numbers, it's an interesting thing. So 2/3 of MSPs are managing devices from more than 5 network device makers. In terms of the total number of networking vendors that Auvik discovered on all those 40,000 networks that it helps manage, there are 614 different vendors represented on those networks, and that's up 7% from last year, which makes it sound like there is this big increase in diversity happening in the market. But they also said in the same report that if you look at the 10 biggest, most widely deployed network device makers, and it's just all the familiar names, Ubiquiti, Meraki, SonicWall, Netgear, et cetera. You look at the top 10, they are now responsible for nearly 90% of that network hardware market share, if you will. And that is up 4.8% from last year. And so the speculation basically is you're seeing continued diversity and lots more vendors than you did before, because people are connecting from home, and who knows what they've got at home that is now part of the network showing up in the Auvik reporting and so on. And so that's what's creating this appearance of diversity. And in terms of what's actually being acquired by businesses and what the MSPs are really kind of looking to build around, that is, if anything, consolidating around the name brands.
Very interesting. Rory, any other comments on that?
No, I think you've kind of nailed it, right? MSPs need to be putting security, cloud security. You can't always do it all, but I know a lot of folks are either AWS experts, Microsoft, and M365 Azure experts. But absolutely, your clients are in those platforms. You need to become somewhat of a security expert or partner with a cloud security architect, depending on how complex those deployments are. And again, I think Wi-Fi and some of the changes that are coming in Wi-Fi and just new Wi-Fi technology specifically based around security, I think those are areas to bet on here in the coming year.
Yeah, and that's a good segue as well, because we've got an interview coming up with Mark Kirstein. He's from Cosant Cyber Security. We're going to be talking about CMMC, and we're going to be talking about the CMMC 2.0 stuff that they just announced at the beginning of November. So I think that's a pretty good segue, I think, to switch right into cybersecurity, since that's always top of mind these days. So
that'll be fun to have somebody who's actually figured out what's going on over there. I don't know if attention, there's a little bit of turmoil in the CMMC world and the people who were in charge, and it seems like they have a hard time getting someone who's not corrupt running the CMMC standards. And it'll be fun to have Mark on.
It will be. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and switch over to that. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Mark Kirstein, where he'll be with us on the other side as well. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Ready to grow your business in ways you haven't even imagined yet? Tune in to B2B Tech Talk, Ingram Micro's global podcast, to hear what's next in the IT space. Industry leaders, subject matter experts, and more share their valuable insights to provide listeners with the best growth opportunities, with some interesting stories sprinkled in along the way. Listen, subscribe, and follow B2B Tech Talk wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, because it's time to imagine more.
Hey, and welcome back to part 2 here of ChannelPro Weekly. The Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, also known as the CMMC, is a newer cybersecurity framework by the U.S. Department of Defense intended for the DoD's supply chain and its contractors. The latest iteration of that, version 2.0, was recently announced. Now, here to talk about that and how it will affect you is Mark Kirstein, VP of Customer Success at Cosant Cyber Security. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's great to have you here. I'd love you to take a few minutes to tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about Cosant Cybersecurity.
Okay, so myself have been in the technology industry for a little over 30 years now, so I'm feeling pretty old. But cybersecurity has been the last 4 or 5 years or so in a focused manner, but I've been dancing around the networking and security industry for probably 10 or 15 years. And as part of Cosant Cyber Security, what our job is to help companies that are trying to get compliant with various cybersecurity standards, help them navigate through that journey and get to that compliant status that their customers are asking them for, and get more secure by nature of actually implementing a very rigorous and structured security program.
That's fascinating. And so you said you've been in the industry quite a long time. Kind of how did you end up at Cosant doing that? What was your path?
I started as a computer engineer 30 years ago, and then went into technology market research and crossed all kinds of different parts of the tech industry, from networking to telecom. Ended up in a sales capacity for the last 5 or 6 years, and Cosant was one of my customers. And what was happening in cybersecurity was so amazing. I mean, there's just so much, demand and such a need for people, to try to help those companies. And then, once you get involved and you see, the businesses that are being impacted and the consequences of a breach, it's impossible not to, kind of dive in and say, I want to help. I want to be part of what's happening, both from an industry standpoint, but also from an altruistic standpoint.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. So I also see on your desk you have a fish, and then I see that looks like a little sailboat up on the top of that bookcase there. Are you an avid fisherman? Do you like the sea?
No, well, I love the sea. I grew up in Southern California, so I grew up. I like to say I grew up on Newport Beach, but I was actually about 10 miles inland. And you never get the ocean out of you when you grow up near it. But at the same time, I haven't been sailing in quite some time. It's one of my former passions that I just live too far away now, living in Scottsdale, too far away from getting an opportunity to do it. And that fish, I don't remember when I first got it, but one of my old business colleagues tells me that it's been traveling around with me in various capacities for the last 15 years.
So you used to do a lot of sailing. So what do you do now if you've hung up your sailor's cap?
Actually, my biggest passion is riding my bike. And I will admit that I cheat a little bit because I've got an electronic bike, but all that means is that I get to go twice as fast and twice as far.
Do you do trails, or do you just kind of ride around? What kind of bike?
No, it's mostly surfaced. It's not so much street riding if I can avoid it, but trails, I can go nice 40-mile round trip in about 2 hours. So that's nice, gives more exercise than one might think. But once again, it's a lot of fun.
Well, it's good. It's good to stay in shape. Rory, do you do any biking or sailing?
I love the idea of both. I've always lived in South Florida, so I've had many friends with sailboats. I love spending time out on the ocean. I have to agree with Mark that once you get the ocean in you, you never want to be too far away from it. I spent some time out in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and I go to Tulsa all the time, and I'm always thinking, man, these places are great. They just don't have the ocean near them. Biking is a great sport, and it's easy to just start doing it wherever you are. I've known I don't bike nearly as much as I should, but I do love it.
Well, very cool. Well, Mark, it's great to have you here, and we've got a lot to talk about. So, because today we're going to be talking, like I mentioned at the top, about CMMC. Now, I gave a little tiny brief statement about it, but why don't you give us a little bit bigger overview on what CMMC is and what it's all about?
Yeah, so I'll try not to be repetitive, but at the same time give a little bit of context. For many years, the Department of Defense has had requirements for their supplier base to implement a baseline level of security, and those are all encompassed under what they call the DFARS requirements, which you have to have a system security plan and a plan of action and milestones. You have to meet certain baseline security controls that are put into place. The problem with that initial state is that many of the companies in the defense industrial base said that they had their security program built out to that minimum level, and the reality is that they didn't. And once you poked around a little bit and you started to see what was actually in there, many of them either didn't understand what they were signing or what they were committing to, or they just hadn't implemented it at the level that they were expected to. And after that became very obvious and kind of widespread knowledge within the Department of Defense, the push for a audited or a certified standard came out, which is what drove CMMC into this mix, was to actually have some means of checking and validating that those pieces were in place. Not necessarily just at the level that was in place for the DFARS requirement, but actually implementing essentially all of what they call the NIST 800-171, which is National Institute of Science and Technology standard that CMMC is based on. Implement all 110 of those controls and audit that to ensure that the companies that are supplying information to the Department of Defense have implemented all of those. That was where we started with CMMC 1.0. A lot of that changed over the last, was not quite a month ago, about 3 weeks ago, when the Department of Defense, responding to some of the challenges in rolling out CMMC, revised it and came out with the CMMC 2.0 standard.
So let's talk about that, because I think it was actually the last time we saw each other was right when CMMC 2.0 was announced. Mm-hmm. There were some folks anticipating there might be changes to the rules around CMMC, but I don't think there was a lot of anticipation of specifically what did change. So what are the big differences between CMMC 1.0 and 2.0? So
probably the biggest difference is there's more flexibility in terms of how many companies are going to have to be audited by a third party. So originally in the CMMC 1.0 world, if you were at a level 3, and there were 5 levels attached to CMMC 1.0, if you were at a level 3 or above, 100% of those companies were going to be audited. And there was an expectation that most companies ultimately would end up at CMMC level 3. With CMMC 2.0, they've simplified those different categories. So now there's only 3 categories attached to it, and what was level 3 is now level 2. And within level 2, only a portion of those companies are going to have a third-party audit, and the rest of those companies are going to have self-attestation, which to some degree is back to the problem we had with DFARS in the first place of self-attestation, no enforcement, no checking. But there's more scrutiny on it now at this stage. Even for the self-attestation, we expect, number one, they're requiring the executives of the company to sign off on it, right? So no longer can it be at a line level or an IT level sign off. You have to have your executive level people sign off. And these are legal representations, not only from a contractual stance, but from a federal law stance. So, some of the enforcement letters that we've seen from the prime contractors will say, please sign here and certify that you've implemented these controls. And remember that lying on this form is a federal crime with prison time and fines attached to it. So it's no small misrepresentation if you certify that you're doing these things and you're actually not. Having said that, still, if we started off at the defense industrial base, which kind of common wisdom is there was about 300,000 companies that were going to be audited and implementing CMMC 2.0 at a full level. In the revised scheme, there's probably on the order of 80,000 of those companies that are still going to have third-party audits attached to what they're doing, and the other ones will be self-attestation. So that's probably the biggest change. One other change that I think is significant and worth noting is they really have now backed CMMC off to match the NIST 800-171 standard exactly. So originally in the different steps or the different stages of CMMC, there were various subsets, and even CMMC level 3 was a superset. It was NIST 800-171 plus an additional, I think it was 12 controls. Now CMMC level 2, which is going to be the self-attestation standard and the standard for audits. If you have a third-party audit, it's going to be an exact match to NIST 800-171.
So what do you think the DoD's thinking was, in terms of revising CMMC? Did they sort of conclude based on feedback, this is too onerous, too complex? Are they trying to, and it's going to take too long, therefore, to implement? they're simplifying this. Why did they feel it was important to simplify CMMC?
Well, again, I'm not party to those insider discussions that take that place. So there's the requisite disclaimer, if you will. But from the outside looking in and observing what was happening, there are, as I said, there were 300,000 companies that were supposedly going to become CMMC certified within 5 years. There at the time was approximately 5 third-party auditors that had made it through the process to be able to conduct the audits. And there were maybe a couple of hundred, readiness providers like Cosant, people who were certified ready providers to help companies get to that. But even with that kind of a pipeline, when you look at 300,000 companies relying on 200, professional organizations to help them get to CMMC, and then 5 that, those 5 might have become a couple of hundred at most, you simply can't get there. There was no capacity to be able to put that many companies through that process and achieve what they were hoping to achieve in the first place. That's the first one that I would point out was just the bottleneck of, we're never going to be able to accomplish what we had set out to do. And we're going to have a perpetual kind of backlog of, how do we get to the front of the line to get the audits that everybody's asking us for. Second piece, I would say, was more of the complexity and the onerous, the level of demands on what many of these companies are small businesses. So don't only think when you're talking about the defense industrial base that we're talking about, huge companies with billions of dollars of revenue and complex electronics and software and those type of things. A lot of the companies that we're pushing through the CMMC requirements are machine shops that might only have $2 to $5 million a year in revenue, and perhaps even less than that that's directly tied to the Department of Defense. So, you had a large segment of companies where, the investment to get to CMMC and maintain it was a fairly substantial lift for them. And likely many of those companies might have made the choice to say, look, this is just too hard and too impactful on our business. We're going to leave the Defense Department as a customer, in which case you start to wonder about, the availability of your supply chain to give you all the parts that you need.
Mark,
So go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, Mark, I don't know if you saw the same thing, but we were hearing from a lot of those smaller contractors where they were saying, we don't know if we can afford this. And maybe some of the contractors they work with were starting to craft, let's call it a bit of an acquisition strategy, where they were saying, we're just going to, we can afford it. And how about if we just start absorbing some of those smaller companies? And, sometimes that creates a little, conflict and maybe not as good as what is out there today. So I think those were some of the concerns that kind of rose to the top as well and got some people scratched.
Yeah, and just like the process they're going through now with CMMC 2.0, there's a public comment period, and there was a lot of input and feedback from the industrial base to the Department of Defense as to the level of onerousness that the original CMMC was going to place on them. So recognizing that it's a significant burden, and in some cases, some of these companies that were being pushed for a CMMC level 3, for example, didn't really have all that sensitive of information. That's one of the things that the Department of Defense looked at is, what if primarily the sensitive information is contract information as opposed to the sensitivity of the actual part that's being manufactured or created, or software that's being manufactured or created. Do those companies need to be as rigorous as those that are actually providing parts that are much more complex or much more sensitive if the information behind those products were compromised?
Let's take a step back from 2.0. I'm sure there are plenty of people in the audience right now who are still kind of trying to wrap their brain around CMMC and understand both where there might be an opportunity for them in terms of growing their business, and where there just might be mandates or requirements that are going to impact them if they're supporting any of the companies in the defense industrial base. So I mean, talk about that a little bit from a partner perspective. What are the opportunities around CMMC, and what are the things that they just need to know and be mindful of from a compliance standpoint?
Well, the things that pop into my mind on that front are, even if we just think about the 80,000 companies that are still going to be compelled to get a third-party audit, that's still a very large set of companies that are going to have to, do a lot of heavy lifting in multiple areas. But some of the key areas, they're going to be working with companies that write policies for them, that put in processes, procedures that help prepare them for the audit and train their teams. They're also going to be working with the IT partners, as many of the people listening to the podcast on here are. So they're going to be implementing those 110 NIST 800-171 controls, of which about not quite 2/3, but a good segment, at least 60% of those are technical controls. And those need to be implemented at a full level. Basically for still all 300,000 of the companies that would be subject to level 2, whether they're audited or not, they're still going to need to implement those controls at one level, and they're going to need partners, because they're going to need partners that are sophisticated enough to also implement the controls on their own behalf. Because as a partner of companies that are CMMC, you're now part of that supply chain, and you may not be directly subject to CMMC, but you will certainly have a level of scrutiny, to be able to participate in that at a higher level. And we already saw with the partners that we've been working with and the clients that we work with on CMMC, that companies are starting to make plans and say, I'm either abandoning the Department of Defense industrial base because I don't want to go down that path and make that level of investment to accommodate them, or I'm going to increase my targeted specialty to focus on those companies because I know the demand is there and I need to establish a critical mass if I'm going to invest in the technologies that I need for both myself and my clients.
How hard is it to prepare yourself to provide that kind of CMMC consulting service, and to what extent does CMMC 2.0 make that easier?
Yeah, so I don't know that CMMC 2.0 makes it that much easier, especially for companies that are going to be on the audited side and have to implement all 110 controls and their partners that are going to be in that mix. I think the challenge that we see amongst the tech companies that are participating in the MSPs that are participating at that level is that many of the controls, at least a third of the controls and the process of getting to CMMC itself is not a technology problem, it's a people problem, right? So if we think about, how are companies going to be secure and what do they need to do to both be compliant and secure their operation, they need people, process, and technology. Technology is only one leg of that stool. And traditionally, many of the MSPs haven't been particularly good at the process and the people side of building that three-legged stool so that all of those pieces come together. So that's one of the reasons why for us, where we only do the administrative controls, we make a great partnership with a lot of different MSPs because they don't want to do that work and they're not set up for it in the same ways. It's not part of the stack, if you will. And we don't want to do any of the technology work. We just want to kind of help our clients navigate through the compliance process and the administrative side of it.
Hey, Mark, I've got a question, if I may, Rich, butt in here for a second. We're talking about the different controls, and you said there's people, technology, and process. What, for those who maybe aren't familiar with a lot of these controls, what are some examples of some of these controls, particularly like the people ones?
Yeah, so people ones and the people ones tie right directly into the administrative controls and the overall system security plan that needs to be put in place. You need to have a policy, and you need to have a process, and you need to have standards for all of the controls that are written out. And that means that's documentation. It's typical of Department of Defense to have a lot of documentation. That's why in the past we've seen parts that seem like they should be relatively cheap be much more expensive than you might expect because they have a lot of documentation to prove that they're doing what they do. Security is no exception, but in the case of people, if you don't have a policy and you don't have a process and you haven't operationalized those elements so that this is actually the way that people go about doing their day-to-day business, then people make mistakes. And so you first have to tell them what the expectation is, then you need to train them how to go about doing that, and then you need to actually audit it, or make sure that they're doing it periodically. So examples of those type of things: incident response plan, right? So you're going to have to write an incident response plan for your business, and that incident response plan is going to define who the teams are that are participating in that, what their responsibility matrix are, and then it's going to go into a playbook that's going to delineate what happens in the event of these different incidences. What sequence do we contact outside experts? Who do we need to notify? How do we contain the breach so that it doesn't continue to get larger? And then how do we get it under control and rebuild, so that our operations continue on a regular basis? Because as we all hear all too often in the security world, it's not a matter of if you're breached, it's a matter of when you're breached. And if you've got good policies and processes and plans to respond to a breach in a effective way, you can sail through it with relatively minor impact compared to having a business crisis, a continuity crisis. Is, am I going to even survive, through this business process?
So does somebody who wants to be part of helping companies comply with the technical requirements, do they have to get a certification of some kind? Can they potentially not get certified, but partner with a company like yours? What's the hurdle you have to clear to become part of the CMMC economy?
That has been one of the ambiguities. There's still a lot of ambiguity in the CMMC world. And, we always are looking for more guidance from prime contractors and from the Department of Defense. So the question that I've heard many, many times is, if my customers are going to be CMMC compliant or certified, do I need to be CMMC compliant or certified as part of my MSP relationship with that customer? And the answer has never been 100% clear. You can look at it from a pure contractual standpoint and say, you as a MSP don't have a contract with a prime contractor or the Department of Defense. So from a contractual standpoint, you have not signed a contract that validates that you are CMMC compliant. But at the same time, you now look at what contracts that the suppliers have signed. They've signed contracts and they've committed to be CMMC compliant or certified, depending on whether they have the audit or not. And they need to make sure that all of their vendor relationships don't compromise, that security. And one of those vendor relationships that's going to be absolutely critical to that, because of the level of access, the level of rights, is the MSP. So there will be requirements that most MSPs that are involved in a Department of Defense supplier relationship are going to have to do, but it's going to be probably imposed on them from their client contracts, not directly from the Department of Defense contracts.
So you mentioned, CMMC 2 just came out, and it's not, it sounds like it's proposed, it's not sort of officially in place yet. With that in mind, and just maybe more broadly, what do the timelines look like for CMMC actually rolling out?
Yeah, so there's now a period of time where, through the government regulations, they have to have public input, they have to have a rulemaking process, and that's a minimum of 9 months. That we would expect before we see actual enforcement where CMMC starts to be in the contracts and required. Probably going to take 12 months to 18 months. Everything in this world tends to take a little bit longer than what you would expect. But at the same time, what we saw before, and it was actually explicit in the CMMC 2.0, the Department of Defense has said that they will favor companies that move forward with CMMC implementation even during the rulemaking process or during the interim period. And I would expect to see the same thing from the prime contractors that are often the middleman between the Department of Defense and the smaller companies. Is, if you are on a CMMC journey, and if you've already got the pieces in place and you can demonstrate it to your customer, they're going to favor those companies. It's going to be a competitive advantage for the companies that are heading down that path. So we have several customers that are working on CMMC right now, and several more that we're talking to about potentially helping them do the CMMC. Not one of them has told us we don't want to continue to push forward at the same pace that we did before. The only thing that they're looking for now is we want to be ready for CMMC as opposed to certified for CMMC, because they realize that they're not going to be able to be certified for at least 9 months. While there's a pause, one thing that I did want to kind of throw into the mix here, which I think is significant for companies that are thinking about, how do I participate in CMMC? Is this an opportunity? What else does it mean for me as a business opportunity or a business venture? The simplification of CMMC and the audit process, and how it's directly and completely tied to 800-171, I think that significantly increases the likelihood of other organizations in the government adopting CMMC much more broadly. So the one that was already on the potential horizon, we haven't heard much about this as of late, but the Department of DHS, Homeland Security, was already talking about potentially moving into the CMMC world. With this simplification and more direct alignment with NIST, I would expect other federal agencies to adopt it more readily, and probably more state agencies, because 800-171 is already fairly broadly applied. People use it at the state level, people use it in the industrial side, because it's a defined standard that's fairly competent, fairly comprehensive, and it's already been defined. So now that we have CMMC aligning with that, I think it increases the likelihood that you'll see much broader adoption, still mostly at the government level, but state and local government as well as federal government.
That's a great point. And Rich, I know you were asking before about MSPs and how MSPs get involved. And you find MSPs are always trying to solve an issue. I think one of the barriers a little bit here is sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and it really is a different skill set from where most MSPs are playing, right? I'm always going to say, if you focus on the security, then it's going to be fairly easy to get you compliant, but it still requires somebody who's looking at this stuff from the compliance side to help set policies that the MSP can help implement. And I think that's where, you're going to see more and more, and we see it, and I'm sure Mark is seeing it, where more MSPs are going, hey, sure, we can read this stuff, and we've got some pretty smart guys over here, but we haven't really played in that arena. And I think that's where we're seeing more and more MSPs wanting to partner with companies that have a compliance readiness and have done it, whether having had experience in other compliance, regulatory compliance landscapes is going to help, right? If you've worked in if you've worked around SOC 2, if you've worked around HIPAA, if you've worked around PCI, it's going to help you. And if you haven't, that's where you're going to want to partner and bring that expertise in, because it's the only way I can explain it is looking at the same stuff, but looking at it through a different lens.
So, Mark, with that in mind, exactly what Rory was just talking about in mind, I know there are people listening right now who are kind of trying to figure out, how do I even begin to evaluate? Do I play in CMMC? Do I partner? Do I, back off from anyone who's involved in the defense industrial base? Do you have any sort of preliminary advice to people right now about how to even go about evaluating what you're going to do with respect to CMMC?
Yeah, I think unless you have a customer base that's already directly in the defense industrial base, then the first question is to broaden it. Don't look at directly from a CMMC or a defense industrial base question. Look at it more from a broad-based, participation in the industry. If I'm a managed service provider, helping my clients with security is going to be a mandate. It's already somewhat of a mandate, but some portions of the MSPs don't do it as well as they should, or don't do it at the level that they should at this stage. So I'd look at it more broadly and say there's no way to have longevity in the MSP space without security. as we move forward. So, start off, if we're just looking at how do we start and how do we evaluate it, start off with NIST CSF, the cybersecurity framework. It's a good solid standard. It's broad-based. It'll be easily mapped into more rigorous standards no matter where you go, but at least you have a defined framework that you've implemented for your business, and then you start to step into implementing or helping your clients implement it for their business. To me, that's table stakes moving into the market as you look forward. And then you can start to ask the questions of, how deep do I want to go in the security side? Do I want to do the administrative side and the compliance side, or do I want to stick to my technical chops? And even on the technical chop side, how much of a balance do I have between my traditional MSP business where I'm really just managing the overall IT infrastructure, or do I want to step more heavily into the hardcore security side of it, where I'm managing a security operations center or SOC, where I'm implementing data loss prevention systems. I'm implementing all of the extended controls that might be more specialized in what people will sometimes call MSSP, managed security software service providers.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, Mark. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I know we could probably talk about this for another 45 minutes because it's so broad of a topic and there's lots of pieces to it. But if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about you and learn more about Cosant Cyber Security, where can they go? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so easy part is Cosant.com, COSANT.com. My email address is mark@cosant.com, so that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to rely on those two electronics forms as the starting point. Of course, they can always look me up on LinkedIn, and I welcome connections as well.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about CMMC quite a bit over the next 18 to 24 months as things kind of get ratified and changed, and compliance with these new frameworks is kind of a big thing. So we're going to be talking about it, I'm sure, often. So Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, great. And hopefully we will have you back. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Rory will be with us on the other side, and we'll close out the show with a little bit of fun and some regular show features. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be right back. And welcome back to part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. Excellent interview with Mark Kirstein. A lot really interesting stuff. It's amazing how deep like that goes. And I know we were starting to scratch the surface. I was trying to get into some of the ideas of like what some of the more specific controls are, because that might be very helpful to people who don't have any customers that are in the DoD pipeline. But it seems like a very complicated and very challenging thing if you're going to try to help one of your customers get there. Rich, any takeaways from that interview?
Just that it was very helpful and clarifying. I'm glad Mark was able to join us there. But this, we actually have a very good sort of primer on CMMC 2.0 by Mike Semmel from Semmel Consulting. He also has been a guest of ours on the show, and I'll include a link to that in the show notes for this episode. I think there is more learning to be done about CMMC 2.0 out there, and clearly lots of really good thinking for folks in the audience to do about how and whether they're going to be involved in the CMMC opportunity. So more homework required, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Rory, any thoughts or takeaways?
No, just kind of what we talked about. Right? I think I have to stick by my thought that the value in partnering with someone who's got that experience is, and kind of knowing what auditors are going to expect. Right? I think that's where a lot of people run into frustration with or surrounding any kind of regulatory compliance. It's like, well, I've done all this, but then the auditor wanted to see that. And having that evidence to provide the auditor, being well prepared for an audit of any kind of regulatory compliance or even a SOC 2, when the auditor starts asking for the evidence and the fact that you've been testing controls and doing the things you're supposed to do, and you're very quickly able to provide them, they're like, hey, these people have their act together, right? The audit goes a whole lot better than when don't know what the auditor is going to ask and you don't know what to expect. And then the auditor starts thinking, oh, I got to dig deep here because these guys don't have they're not well prepared. Let me dig in.
Yep, for sure. And I was also going to ask him too, and I guess we didn't get to it, but I was thinking like, what I was curious is if you have your customers who are maybe already NIST, already can pass the NIST assessment tests, how much more of a reach is it to get to CMMC compliance? And I is it not a lot, or do you know that, Rory? If you're NIST 800 compliant, I guess, is it just a little bit more?
I don't know the answer to that, but that's one of the things. One of the pieces of software, we have a SaaS software that we've been developing for a while. We're actually rolling it out here at the end of the year, called TrueSpeed. And one of the things that it does is sort of gives you visibility into things. One of the things we always want to build in is if you have some regulatory compliance that you have to adhere to, how far off are you from also being able to comply with another one, right? Like if you're already SOC 2, how far away are you from being HIPAA compliant? How far are you from being CMMC compliant? You load those up and you click on it, get some kind of visibility into that. But doing that kind of matrix where you can see, I think that's a readiness tool that people could really get into, right? Like we've been doing this for a long time. Show me where the gaps are, and maybe even give me a dollar figure, right? What's it going to take for me to get from here to here? That's something that our clients have asked for, right? We worked a lot in the energy space, and I know we've worked for some gas and oil companies, and they're always thinking about dollars, right? Every drop of oil is $1, and when you start talking about some of these stuff, they're like, hey, our CFO would really buy off on this if ultimately we don't have a score necessarily. It says, well, here's our cyber maturity score. That's great. But if you can turn that score and say, well, here's how much money you're risking. And now they can look at, well, how much should I invest in mitigating that versus what it could cost me? Anytime you can put dollars to it, it's brilliant and people get it. But yeah, having that sort of thing, I'm gonna find out and see if we could do that sort of thing. If we could load up those various regulatory requirements to kind of easily do a gap analysis, that'd be something fun to get out there to people that they could use internally.
That would be, yeah. You'll have to let us know how that progresses. That sounds really interesting and probably very useful to a lot of people for sure. So interesting stuff. It was awesome having Mark on. I'm sure we're going to be talking about CMMC more down the road as things unfold there. So, but now we're going to move on. We're going to have a little bit of fun before we close out the show and kind of learn what's going to happen next week. And Rory, you've been on before. You played 5 questions with us, but what we're going to do this time, something a little different. We're just coming out of a holiday. We're going to play 5 questions, Thanksgiving edition.
Thanksgiving edition. Okay.
So what's going to happen is Rich and I are going to ask you 5 questions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But they're going to be Thanksgiving themed, and it'll be a lot of fun. At least we hope.
I cannot claim to be a Thanksgiving expert.
Well, we'll
grew up in a Cuban family. We're just trying to figure out what's going on here, but I'll play along. I was born in Brooklyn, but still.
So I think you'll do just fine. This is going to be mostly like stuff you like. So Rich, you want me to go first to kind of give you an idea of what I'm thinking?
Go for it.
All right. So there's a lot of rigorous debate around the appropriate and perfect pie at the conclusion of a Thanksgiving dinner. Some say pumpkin, others say pie. Rory, what is your top Thanksgiving pie, or maybe top 3 if it's one of those 2?
Oh man, I got to tell you, there's a lot of people who love pumpkin. There's a lot of people who love pecan. Apple pie typically makes an appearance there, and I'm not a big fan of those textures necessarily. So I say any time of year, including Thanksgiving, I have to go with key lime.
He's going key lime for Thanksgiving.
Going lime.
Can he do that?
If he's from Florida, I say yes.
Exactly. You know, BYOP, right? Bring your own pie, because I knew they weren't going to have key lime. I'll tell you what, though, I have to plug a place in Largo, Florida, which I think is called the Pie Factory, and whatever they're selling is fantastic. Somebody actually who worked at Tech Data told me about the Pie Factory, and one time I went to the Pie Factory, I think it was right before Thanksgiving, there was a line of people picking up pies that they had pre-ordered. I had not done such a thing, so I just went and got whatever they had. And they were making one pie that was made of 4 sections of 4 different, it was like their sampler pie. I highly recommend it. Everything in it was fantastic. So it turns out I am a fan of pie, but if I have to go to, I got to go to key lime.
He's going key lime, Thanksgiving or not. All right, Rich, question number 2 to you.
Should sweet potatoes have marshmallow or something like that on top of them, or do you just eat the sweet potatoes?
So I love that you guys are making the game up as we go along. So Rich, I'll first, you can see what I'm thinking. I'm just going to make up some questions. You know, I'm probably like a sweet potato purist, but I'm probably okay. Like, here's my thing. I don't like, you know how they put nuts in Thai food? I don't like when you're eating something that's predominantly soft and then there's little pieces of hard stuff in it. Like I'm like, why are you putting nuts in my Thai food? So I'm going to go with it. You want to put, you know, sweet potato, relatively soft, and you want to put something like marshmallow in it, I'm good. But I'm like, leave the nuts off. I will eat the nuts separately. I want my nuts on the side.
All right. Question number 3 to me. What is your favorite Thanksgiving tradition? Something that you always do. I'll give you some examples. Like, some people like to watch the Macy's parade. Some people like to go, I don't know what else people like to do. Watch football. Like, what is your tradition?
Wow. Thanksgiving tradition. I don't know. I don't know, you know, probably going back to food here. You know, a lot of people love, you know, their cranberry sauce, and everybody has a favorite cranberry sauce. A lot of people make their cranberry sauce, great cranberry sauces, and my daughter loves that. You know, when you get the can of cranberry sauce and beat it out of the can, it comes out looking like the can, and then you slice it up, and a lot of people will go, oh, that's not cranberry sauce. So I think my favorite holiday tradition is having a can of cranberry sauce somewhere, making her think we didn't get one. When she starts questioning the cranberry sauce that we're having, then I go, it's okay, I got you covered. And I go get the can and open it up, and we scoop out this can-shaped you know, pile of cranberry sauce made by, you know, Ocean Spray or somebody like that.
I love it. That's a big hit here too. So giving your kid a hard time is a tradition on Thanksgiving. I love it. That's fun. All right, Rich, question number 4 to you.
Now, this might vary year to year, depending on whether you tend to do Thanksgiving dinner with the same people and whether or not it's family and so on. But if you were to rate the likelihood on a 0 to 100% scale of a political argument breaking out at some point during the Thanksgiving celebration, where does that come in?
Oh, you know, I recently saw a post. It was actually an MSP buddy of mine put on Facebook. You know, it was a T-shirt for you to break the ice and get the conversations going at Thanksgiving, and it was a T-shirt that said something like, I'm unvaccinated, let's talk politics. And of course they had the other one, right? I am vaccinated, let's talk politics. But I got to tell you, my family is pretty good about not talking politics. Whether it's you know, again, having come from a Cuban family. You know, I was the first one in my family not born in Cuba, but absolutely later in the evening, after dinner and after some folks have had some drinks, talking Cuba politics and all the things. You know, this is growing up over time, and all the ways we're going to go back and kick Castro out of Cuba, and all the things that are going to happen there. That would absolutely kick up. And if it ever did turn to American politics, it was all about you know, America just needs to learn to always face away, run away from anything that looks, you know, socialist or communist, because we've lived it, and buyer beware.
For sure. Interesting. All right. Last question. Let's see, which direction should I go? I got two that I want to ask, Rory, and they're completely unrelated, so I can't put them together.
The great part of this, by the way, is that it's at the very end, and the podcast has already been running like 6 hours. Like, I really don't care what Rory does for Thanksgiving. So, you know, I get that this is just us having fun.
You'd be surprised how many people like the segment. That's a lot of people who like this. It's fun. You get to learn interesting things about people. All right. Let's go there. What is the ultimate Thanksgiving side? There's lots of them to pick from. What is the best Thanksgiving side? Definitively.
The best Thanksgiving
side
sign?
dish. Yes.
Sign? S-I-G-N?
No, side dish.
Oh,
side
dish.
You said we were team turkey, team sides. If you're thinking Thanksgiving sides, what is the best one?
Oh, well, you know, you've got to have good mashed potatoes, but I'm a year-round mashed potato guy, right? Like my daughter is convinced that I pick restaurants on whether or not they have good, you know, get mashed potatoes at all as a side. She's like, we're going there because you feel like having mashed potatoes, don't you? So I think the mashed potato, but you know, you can get those year round. So I have to go with the green bean casserole.
Green bean casserole is the ultimate side, huh?
Well, the green bean casserole, I think you get the little can of the turkey onions, and it's printed on the side, right? I think it's like some cream of mushroom soup, and you know, and you drop these on top, and it's fantastic. And I think usually if you're associated to me, they're like, oh, we have to make some green bean casserole because Rory's coming. So yeah, I have to go with that in case anybody in my family watches this and I didn't say the green bean casserole. And they're going to be, why have we been making green bean casserole? All he cares about is the mashed potatoes.
Let it be declared, Rory Sanchez says the best Thanksgiving side is green bean casserole. If you don't agree, we're going to put his email address in the show sheet for episode 208, and you can take it up with him and you can argue with him over email. No, and folks, what is your ultimate Thanksgiving side? Send us an email, podcast@channelpronetwork.com. Post it in the comments. Let us know what it is. We want to hear what your favorite is and hear what other people like, because you know, you might say something that we've never tried and that might be fun. And thanks for playing. Fun little Thanksgiving Day edition of 5 questions. Rich, we probably missed a lot over the last couple of weeks. Why don't you give us a little recap of what we might have missed and what might be coming up ahead in the future?
Well, you know, in terms of catching up on stuff you might have missed, a great way to do that every Friday is go to channelpronetwork.com, check out our In Case You Missed It post written by ChannelPro's own James Gaskin. This week, he is going to catch you up on some of the news from AWS reInvent, which we mentioned briefly before. There are some new partner roles that have been added to the Cisco Partner Program for you to potentially qualify for. You'll read about those there. Ninja One, previously or formerly Ninja RMM, has rolled out some image backup and endpoint security functionality. ConnectWise acquired Smileback. If you know what Smileback is about, you understand the significance of that. We didn't really have time to get into it, but Smileback, the CEO of Smileback was Jamison West, our good friend here from the podcast. So you're going to get all of that from James this week, as well as a story from China illustrating the little-known fact that karaoke can be dangerous to your health. and you'll find out how. It has nothing to do with COVID, folks. It's kind of interesting, actually. Coming up next week, not much happening on the event front. In fact, you're going to see things kind of slow down, obviously, as we head into the holidays at this point. But there is a little bit of hardware news out there. There's some interesting work from home networking kind of news that I can't get into. So there are some things happening there on the news front. And then do not forget that on December 8th, next week, as we record this, ChannelPro is hosting its last summit event, online summit event of the year. It is our annual Managed Services and Cloud Solutions online summit. Like I said, takes place December 8th. You can get details. You can sign up at events.channelpronetwork.com. We have got sessions for you. Actually, Rory, one of the sessions we're doing goes right to what you were talking about earlier on the show. Hardware endpoints, managing endpoints, just less and less relevant to the SMBs out there right now. So what does the post endpoint managed services practice of tomorrow look like? We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about hybrid cloud security, very relevant to our conversation here today. We're going to be talking about how to get more value from your RMM and PSA and other tools and take full advantage of the functionality there. And we're going to have a session dedicated to probably the biggest headache that a lot of people listening and watching right now are dealing with, which is hiring and recruiting and retaining talented people. So all sorts of great content. Events.channelpronetwork.com. Check it out, register, and we hope to see you next week.
Don't want to miss it, folks. Go there, check it out, register, and close out the year with an awesome event. Rory Sanchez, CEO of True Digital Security, was our guest host this week. Always awesome to have you on, Rory. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, learn more about True Digital Security, where can they go? How can they find you?
Oh, I'm easy to find. Rory.Sanchez at TrueDigitalSecurity.com. Thanks for having me on. Always a fun time, and have a great end of the year.
Yeah, you too.
We'll connect in 2022.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll have you back, of course. And it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you again so much for being with us and being part of the show. With that, we're going to say goodbye for this week, but we will be back next week. Even though we are doing an event, we will be back next week, right, Rich?
Yep.
Yes, we will. Okay. So we will see everybody in 209 next week. See you then.